there, YouTube. This is Dermy Wormy. I'm coming at you with another installment in the G Gundam series review, whatever you want to call it. This is episode 4. And this episode is Challenge the Red Rose Knight. Out of all the G Gundam episodes, I think this is one of the, probably one of the weaker ones, in my personal opinion, just because G Gundam is it's a show that knows what it is. It has a lot of heart, and it knows what it wants to do. This is one of those episodes where a bunch of stupid stuff happens. It's charming in its own regard, but I'm not a fan. I'm not a huge fan of the character they introduced this time. Chippity Crockett's one thing. Sai Saishi's a whole another thing. Sai Saishi's fun. And the character we introduce next time, I think, is a very compelling character with a very good story. This character, however, I very much view him as a pompous, not really egotistical. I would say kind of high and mighty prick. I don't know if that's quite the words to describe him. He's very honor and duty bound, very country bound. He's a knight, so he does a lot of those knightly things, like a knight never does this, and a knight never does that, and I must do this for my country and for my princess. It's kind of a pompous prick. But I do enjoy his Gundam. I think his Gundam's very unique. And I think this is other than Dragon Gundam, I think this Gundam, which is Gundam Rose, starts showing that, hey, a lot of these Gundams have inspirations from the country they are to represent. And Rose Gundam is very much a French Gundam. And I kind of like the look. But all in all, I'm not going to be splitting too much hairs. We'll just get into it, shall we? So we start here. You know the thing. You know, you get your narrator, talks about why everything's happening, stuff like that. Colonies go to space to avoid war. Gundam fight. Earth. Talks about the picture, how will it affect this week. And then we get our first look at George Descent of Neo France. And as I was saying earlier, Rose Gundam. As you can see, Rose Gundam has a very, very, very French knight look. Kind of like the Napoleonic era. Has the shoulder cloak, the Napoleonic hat, the little tassels right here, all knights and everything like that. And I find this is, I think, when it starts showing how the series takes its Gundams. Their Gundams are very unique in their own regards, and again, this starts going into why I find Gundam Maxter just too basic. Because you get Gundams like Dragon Gundam. You get Gundams like this. You get Gundams like Shining Gundam, and Shining Gundam hasn't even shown off some of its trump cards yet on why Shining Gundam's pretty badass. But getting ahead of myself. George Descent, kind of a pompous guy. So we start don't really know what the name of this Gundam is. I want to say it was Scarab Gundam, but I'm pretty sure that's not who this Gundam is. And there is I'm going to try to get a better view of this right off the bat. Yeah, right here. So, George and this Gundam and Gundam pilot are about to have a battle. And it's all, knightly. It's all this and that. And it's kind of treated as a sport by several of the French, I guess you could say, nobility, kind of higher class. How about we say that? By the higher class of France, they treat this kind of as a sport. This is where we get our first look at Princess, whose name is escaping me. Give me a moment. I'm definitely not looking up her name real fast, even though I just heard it. Definitely not. Marie Louise, yes. Princess Maria Louise. The butler, who also has a name. I completely forget the name. I find the butler kind of fun, though. There's a later episode where the butler does some pretty cool stuff. But we get to see them kind of, watching the fight from above in an airship. The butler asks Maria to kindly back away from the side. That way you don't get hurt in case something bad happens. She kind of tells him no. You see George up above on his Gundam. You see the pilot for this Gundam. And they're about to have a one-on-one fight. Everything's gearing up. George is, being George, kind of a pompous prick, saying, hey, this is a knightly duty, and I will kindly be taking you out for the honor of my nation. And then you get something starts appearing, and Domon, if I can do this right, Domon appears and says, instead of fighting him, I want you to fight me. Kind of just appears. And George says, no, can't fight you. I challenged him. And Domon says, well, why don't you ignore this lower rate fighter and go after, want to play with some of the big boys like you and I. And Domon kind of also says that, you two can both come at me at the same time. How about that? And George says, no, can't do that. It's against regulations and yada yada yada. God, he's just so pompous, straight and narrow, and kind of annoying. The Gundam pilot gets all ticked off with Domon, and Domon just one-shots him from behind without even looking. So Domon challenges George. George continues to decline. Domon then goes in for the attack. George immediately uses Rose Gundam. Rose Gundam does something that never does again in the series, I'm going to admit. Gets behind Domon. Throws Domon off. And if I can get it just right there. He throws the Rose Bit, which we will see more of later in the episode, at Domon, and it blows up, damaging Domon's arm unit. George basically says, I have no time for savage battles with a savage fighter, so I am off. And George flies away, and we get this lovely look of Maria staring up at her knight, George Descent, and I'm just so tired. I'm just not a fan of these characters. I don't know what it is. Maria's kind of annoying. George is too much of a prick, too straight and narrow. I like the butler. He does some pretty cool stuff in a later episode. So we then cut to like a docking bay under this place in France, which I don't know. And you get Rain working on the Gundam unit, trying to repair the damage, and basically it just needs to get new parts. So it's not a big deal. But this is something that I really love about the show, is because throughout this entire show, when it comes to Rain, they haven't specifically told you, until this episode, they finally tell you, like, one of her roles in the show. She's the engineer for the Gundam unit. She's also the medical doctor for Neo Japan. So that is her role, and they don't tell you either of those things. They tell you one of them this episode, but they have been showing you, saying, "Hey, this is what she does. She does repairs on the Gundam unit. She makes sure Domon is healthy and up to date, and is to assist with Domon." And I love that. Show us, don't tell us. But Rain's working on all that. She's getting done. And Domon's upstairs communicating with members of Neo Japan. I cannot remember this guy's name precisely, but he is a recurring character. We'll figure it out in a later episode. But he starts informing us, and this is an episode also where claws for the greater story of the show start appearing. More than just that photo. More than just the names on the back of the photos, like the countries that they have to go to. Things start kind of, hey, there's something here. What's going on? And you get this gentleman from Neo Japan talking to Domon, saying, "Hey, you were chosen to be our fighter for a specific reason." They don't tell us what that reason was. You are to go down there and fix the problem. If you don't, your father's situation could get worse. I'm probably paraphrasing a bit there. So we start finding out that something to do with their father. Domon wasn't just sent down to Japan, to America, to fight in the tournament for any old reason. There's a reason he's down here. And what is that reason? Time will only tell. And we also get an introduction of a very important character here in a bit, but we'll get to that. This guy is basically telling Domon, you gotta do this. If you don't, bad things will happen. Domon's getting a little annoyed with him, says that he's down here, he's being a good fighter. And the guy starts getting all mouthy and lippy, kind of hard brash, and Domon just throws the bottle into the TV. Domon's ticked off with the guy. Rain comes by and starts telling him, "Hey, should probably calm down a little bit, but it's understandable for you to be annoyed. I could only imagine your father's situation and having to deal with all that. And all you have are these names that on the back of this photo, I believe they said this is the first time they say Major Alube, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But there's names on the photos. These are the last two. Hopefully we can finally narrow down who we are looking for and what we are looking for. What are we looking for? I know. I ain't gonna tell. You probably know if you've already seen the series. But I ain't gonna tell." Domon kind of takes the photo and walks away, all ticked off, says he's going out. Rain doesn't want him to leave, but she does. She pulls off the glove, smacks her. Does nothing big deal. Now the little thing that Domon threw a bottle at starts ringing. And getting used to this, she says that it's Major Alube's secret code. So something's starting to happen. Oh, I also forgot. Domon's in trouble because he interrupted a fight, and I completely forgot to mention that because that's partially a part of it. And yeah. So we hop over to... I don't think this is the Palace Versailles? I don't think this is Palace Versailles in France, but we hop over to some big palace where a party's going on, and you see Princess Maria Louise is being courted by a bunch of men and saying, "Oh, how lovely you are," and oh, will you kindly give me a dance? Oh, we're gentlemen. Oh, pompous pricks. And Maria's really not interested, but she's being nice about it. And she notices that George is going out to the balcony, and she goes after him. And George and her start talking about the Gundam, the fights, and basically how George is a representative, and he would love to bring honor back to the once great empire of Neo-France. And Maria asks him, "Would you ever want to fight for my honor?" George says yes, but he says also he wants to fight for the honor of Neo-France. He is a knight first and foremost. He cares more about his country, his honor, his duty, his family's title, all that stuff. So he's an honorable man. I just so straight and narrow. He does start acting kind of better than people in later episodes because I'm a knight. Oh, shut up. Although there is some later episodes where he's pretty badass, but I can't get to those yet. Maria's kind of disappointed with that answer. Well, first off, he says yes, but then he said to fight for France, and yeah, she's not very happy with that answer. She disappears. She goes into her room, writes his name, and says, "How do I get him to notice me?" And this is where the whole debacle for this episode starts. And it's all because of a little girl who's starstruck with some dude, thinking she has a smart idea. And her idea is to pretend to be kidnapped and blame it on, let's get this just right, on Japan. One of the smartest ideas she could come up with is bringing up such a stupid idea. Especially towards the end, and just how this all starts is because some girl is starstruck and wants some guy to notice her, and I dislike it. I dislike it a lot. But George is determined to go find Japan now, even though it takes a while. Maria goes to a cafe, orders some coffee, doesn't have the money to pay for the coffee, and the waiter is getting a little annoyed because she left without money. And then the fighter from earlier shows up, pays for the coffee and stuff, and starts kind of antagonizing Maria. And Maria says, "Hey, I'm just the princess. I can't help you. Bye." They start kind of blocking him off, saying, hey, they're kind of ticked off with the results of the fight from earlier. They're getting all kind of ticked off with her. Starts preparing to beat up a little girl, very much establishing that these guys are bad, but it really doesn't matter that much because the main fighter goes down immediately, and it's Domon there to rescue her in the nick of time. I'm not a fan of this episode. Domon basically then just takes out all the thugs one at a time. And yeah, he takes them out. The princess asks, hey, are you Neo Japan's fighter? He says no. she says, well, obviously you are. You just kicked these guys' butts. Will you help me out? And I can get you a fight with George. And Domon is interested and takes her up on the offer. A little midway credit scene. I kind of like that scene. Yeah. I'm not the biggest fan of this episode. I just find it so... Some of the situations are just stupid. And how it all goes down is because some little girl... Some very young girl has the hots, it looks like, for a guy who's much older than her. And it creeps me out. I find George to be pompous. And Domon is very much kind of a stupid guy in this episode. Out of all the episodes in this entire series, this is one of my least favorite. And it's so this is still a very high bar to cross in the entire series. This episode I just do not like. I don't like it. So they go back to their little hideout for right now. Fill Rain in on the situation, and oh my god, I knew it was bad, but god, the animation here just looks horrific. Her nose is crooked, her eyes look too big, it looks fake. But Maria's already set the plan in motion. The idea is, hey, Domon's gonna kidnap her, tie her up, George is gonna come, and she's already set it in motion. And Rain basically says that she doesn't like this idea. We have to be leaving, like, immediately, because Major Lube has decided to wipe all the information, get rid of solve the little issue that they have with the interrupting of the fight, and they are to immediately go off to Neo Russia, where their Gundam, if I can get a good look at it, you get a small glimpse of it. Bolt Gundam is waiting for competitors. So this leads into next episode, which introduces, I would have to say, my fourth favorite character in this, well, third favorite character in this entire series. But that's next week. Anyways, gotta get through this one. Domon basically says, I want to fight George. And Rain pleads with him not to do this. Domon basically says, no, I gotta do this. And then Rain reminds him of his father. We get the first look at his father. If you've been watching the opening credits, you've seen his father before. Still don't know what's going on with the father. Domon kind of gets annoyed with that and says that he's going to go fight George. She gets all annoyed and they lock her in the toilet. Yeah. And she's all ticked off. Maria says, well, don't worry. She has all of the major amenities in there. And they go off. She's locked in the toilet. How do you lock a bathroom from outside, even in the future? Even in this future world, how do you lock a bathroom from the outside? I don't like this episode. Everything's been set in motion. I probably have already overpassed it. And well, no, it's right here. Maria gave a note to the waiter, basically saying, "Hey, it's supposed to be Domon, but Maria wrote it, and it says, "Hey, I took Maria. Meet me over here for a battle that will be done by sunrise." George is already aware. He's a smart character, but he's already aware something's up. But he's going off to go save Miss Maria. And they do a whole, off to battle, taking the Rose Gundam to battle. Oh, rah, rah. I don't like this. Too much ceremonial. We hop back to the base where Rain's unlocking the door from the inside because Domon forgot she is a mechanic and she has skills to break these electric locks. Why he forgot that, I don't know, but he did. She cracks the lock and then starts heading off. We cut over here to underneath the busted Eiffel Tower, where Domon is tying up Princess Maria. Maria's asking him to kindly do it lighter. He's saying, I can't. We'll get this over with, but I'm doing the best I can. George shows up for the fight. She's all excited because George actually came for her. Touches down. Domon then heads off and confronts him. George kind of says, do you have no shame? You stole the princess. And Domon and him start having, words back and forth. And Domon's all excited to finally have this fight. And it all begins, you get the thing, da 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 da. But then you see Rain's driving over on the little hover thing. She starts noticing that the fight's begun, and Domon and George continue their fight. And to be honest, it is a very close fight. It's a very, they know they're very matched. And the fight continues. A lot of things happen, and they're one-on-one, and they're equal in strength. Rain then hops up to the tree where Maria's at and starts untying her, but Maria's all in awe because George is fighting for her and is prepared and wants George to notice her, and just, I don't like this. This storyline, this episode just has a stupid story because it's all about how Maria wants George to notice her and fight for her, not just for Neo France, whatever place we're at right now. And it's stupid. And what Rain says is when men fight, they don't see anything else other than their fighter, the opponent that they are fighting. And Maria doesn't believe that about George. And then George hears what they're saying and says, it is true. In this moment right here where I am battling, all I can see is the man in front of me. And all he cares about right now is beating Domon. And Maria kind of gets sad with that remark. And yeah, Domon and we get back to the fight. Domon and this is just one of those episodes that I'm just annoyed. Domon is trying to think of my words, is still just neck and neck with George. George then goes for a parry. Domon blocks it. George is very impressed because not a whole lot of people can actually block his attacks, and Domon jumps up, tries to come down for a strike with the sword, with his sword, and knocks George's sword, saber, whatever, out of his hand. George is just extremely impressed, and now it's time to reveal Rose Gundam's trump card. And it is the pride of Neo France, the Rose Bits. It's not a Gundam series without funnels. So I'm going to go into this. This is one of the reasons I kind of like Rose Gundam. Because I kind of like funnels. Funnels are really cool, really kind of OP if used correctly. They are very watered down in this series. They're not as strong as they have been in the past. They're also not as large, but they're still extremely useful. In fact, they almost get George the win this time, except for what's the term when you have a device that basically can break plot? I can't think what it's called. Anyways, the Rose Bits start heading after them because George sends them out with I cannot remember the name of the attack, but it's like Rose Stride or something like that. And they start flying after Domon, shooting him, and one of them gets his leg unit here, causing Domon to collapse to the ground. They start forming all up around him and create a cage all over him, and it starts causing Domon issues to get up. It starts affecting with the machinery within the unit. Domon's struggling, doesn't know how to fix himself, and you see George just slowly walk up saying, well, now this is over, I'll just end the match here and now. Domon starts laughing, saying it's not over, there's still one thing I can do. George is shocked that there's even anything that he can do, and he decides to do the shining finger. And Rain says, yep, that's what's about to happen. So Domon uses the shining finger attack to destroy all the rose bits at once. And in doing so, every rose bit starts blowing up, and it goes from here all the way over here. I'm going to try to show you exactly what starts happening because of all the rose bits blowing up. I don't know how they get all the way over there. But the Eiffel Tower starts falling down more. And this is probably a saving grace for this episode. What's about to start happening. Because it starts showing another side of George that is kind of more endearing, but I find him just so much of a pompous prick. So the Eiffel Tower starts falling. It's set to potentially smash. If I can get the scene just right. Yeah, it's set to fall and potentially smash Rain and Maria Louise. So George starts rushing over to stop everything. Domon says, you're still in the middle of a fight, and George says you never turn your back to an opponent, spins around, throws his arms up in the air. Domon comes in for a shining finger attack, but stops just before the final blow because he notices that George is holding up the Eiffel Tower, and in doing so has saved Maria and Rain, more importantly. So George says, just hurry up and finish it. I'm weak, but I quit fighting because one of my first and foremost jobs is to honor my country, and I can't do that if my princess dies. So he would be bringing dishonor to the name Descent. So match pretty much ends there, kind of struggling back and forth. And with that, everything's pretty much done. Maria goes off. Maria is sent off. George is there seeing her off. Before all that, they do have a remark about the Gundam saying, hey, I'm sorry, got all beat up. But at least the head unit's still intact and still beautiful as ever. So Maria's kind of upset, and George basically vows to always fight for her and always protect her, along with Neo France. So she gets what she wants. George is definitely going to be fighting for her behalf, and that's pretty much that. Kind of weird. Anyways, though, we get back here. Domon and Rain are enjoying coffee. George is all like, well, you were a pretty good fight, and I can't wait to see you again. It's pretty much what happens. And George walks off. Rain and Domon start having a little back and forth, and Rain says, well, would you ever fight for me, Domon? And Domon says, well, you're not a princess, so guess not. And that's pretty much the end of the episode. And Rain's all annoyed, and that's that. All in all, I'm not a fan of this episode. I just got to get through it. On the grand scheme of things, I would end up giving this episode maybe a 4 out of 10. Well, no, that feels just... That doesn't feel fair. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Because so much of the show is like 7 out of 10s, 8 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s. There is a few, I would argue, 10 out of 10s. But they're later in the series. There's an episode that I'm excited to get to that is just... It's so perfect. And it's so impactful that I'm just excited for it. But because you have such this high bar, that when you get a low bar episode like this, that's just boring. I want to get through it. I'm not a fan of the character it introduces. I find them all kind of pompous and just self-centered, even though George is all about how honor and reputation and knighthood and all that. And Maria's just a young princess that doesn't understand shit. It is hard to judge. It's hard to say that an episode is shit when in reality it's probably decent. So I would give it a 5 out of 10. Still watch this series. There's going to be, even in a great series, there's going to be crappy episodes. But I guess that's that. Next week episode, we go to Neo-Russia and introduce, like I've been saying, my third favorite character. I have 3 favorites. We won't see at least one of them for another couple episodes. My first favorite character. And then my second favorite character comes in shortly after that. But Neo-Russia, where we will meet Argo Golfsky, the space pirate. And I'm excited because I love his storyline. I love his episodes. I find them endearing. I find them... He is a man that is amazing. And I'll save it till then. And as you can see, I'm getting more and more excited. I was excited last week for this episode because Neo France is pretty fun. Later in the series, and I completely forgot, when they first introduced him, it's kind of annoying and kind of a slow burn. So there are some later episodes with Neo France that give George some more depth, but just right off the bat, he's just such a pompous prick. So all in all, y'all have a good one. If you like the video, leave a thumbs up. Leave comments down below. Share it out with your friends. Follow me on the Twitch, Twitters, Rumbles, YouTubes, whatever you are watching it. And I think that's that. I'm going to be doing some more live streams over here. I did one last night, and I just had a blast. So we're going to be doing some more stuff over here. Maybe turn Twitch into the, instead of video games, just use it for watch parties. And then over here, we'll play games and we'll talk. Hang out. Because that was pretty fun last night. So bye for now.